You, brethren, have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Let's stop right there. That's a really important passage. So what Paul is doing now, he's laying out this foundation, and he's saying everything is premised on the premise of love. If you can imagine, prior to Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension back to the Father, prior to that, the law gave you instructions of how to do life, what not to do, what you can do, and only go this far over here. It was a natural framework of how to do life. But when Jesus died, rose from the dead, ascended back to the Father, all of that went away, and it now became an issue of you are no longer controlled by external realities called the law. You are now controlled is not the right word, you are empowered and enabled by the grace of Jesus Christ and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, who will now compel you, and we're going to get to walking in the Spirit in a moment, now compel you to walk in the Spirit. And so Paul is saying, listen, if you can imagine he straddled before the cross and after the cross. He was the number one preacher, teacher, enforcer of the law before he had the encounter on the road to Damascus. And now he is the best enforcer, encourager, champion of grace in Jesus Christ. He's saying, listen, that freedom that you feel when Jesus comes in your life and you no longer have a rule book to follow, that freedom is not for the lust of your flesh. Your human nature always tries to acquire what it wants, what its emotions want, what its passions want, what its desire want. And Paul's saying that freedom you have is not for that purpose. It is actually designed to allow you to love people more than you were allowed to or were able to prior to saying yes to Jesus. So he's saying, listen, that lust of your flesh wants freedom. How many know that lust wants freedom? It wants no accountability, and it wants to satisfy its emotions, passions, and desires. And it's running rampant in our culture today. I don't feel like it. It does not matter what you feel. What is the Spirit saying to you in this moment? And the more you give into your passions, desires, the quieter the Holy Spirit's voice becomes in you, that you now call this the Spirit. So this is why Paul said you cannot give into the lust of your flesh, because the lust of your flesh is about what you want. Then you have to learn to walk in the Spirit. So now let's jump into the phrase that I did all that to get to right here. That's the longest introduction I think I've ever done. Verse 16, I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do things that you wish. You do not do things that you wish. Think about that for a second. You do not do things that you wish. That right there sends shockwaves through culture right now. I want to do this. Doesn't matter if you want to do it. But look at verse 18, there's a change in language. But if you are led by the Spirit. In verse 16, walk in the Spirit. In verse 18, if you're led by the Spirit. There's a big difference between being in charge of the Spirit than being led by the Spirit. And what's the point? Because in Galatians 4:19, and just a couple chapters earlier, Paul says, I labor for you so that Christ can be formed in you. I shared with you last Sunday morning and a couple Sunday nights ago that God is the general contractor. He bought the land with his son Jesus, or Jesus paid the price for the land, which is you. He bought the property, which is you. And the Holy Spirit is the construction remodeling crew that is now inside of you, remodeling and reconstructing your entire life to look like him. And the only way that can happen is if you allow yourself to be led by the Spirit. You cannot be successful in your walk with the Lord unless you are led by the Spirit. It is impossible. It is humanly impossible. People have been trying it for centuries, and they failed every single time. The only way to be successful in the Lord is to actually be led in the Spirit. Now, does that mean that your eyes are closed and you're just kind of floating through life? No, it doesn't mean that. It's amazing how many, especially in the charismatic stream, we have this idea of like, man, I just spend all my days soaking before the Lord because I want to be led by the Spirit. I'm not diminishing that. There is a place for that, but we have to understand that's not normal life right there. Those are moments and encounters with the Lord, but at some point you have to get up out of your chair, out of your room, and go live life. And it's in those moments where you begin to listen to the voice of the Spirit. What's he saying in this moment? What's he saying in this moment? What's he want in this moment? And it's you being guided by the Spirit. And sometimes you can tell when you have that. I bet you I can talk to everybody in this room individually. Do you know the difference between the lust of your flesh and the Spirit? I'd be surprised if someone says, I'm confused which one's which. No, because most people have a decent idea of like, man, I know that's not the Lord. It is those things the Spirit said, no, this is what you're doing. So what's your goal? It's such a war. I want to do this all the time, but I hear what the Lord's saying over here. You keep listening to what the Holy Spirit telling you. At some point, the desires of God will become normal for you. This is why you can run into certain people. For example, pornography has nothing on me. There is literally no desire in me for that. What is that? Is that I've allowed the Holy Spirit to construct his desires, his passions, his views, that I see that said, that is so disgusting. This is why people get saved. One moment, I just heard an incredible story about 2 months ago of some friend of ours, family member, has not served the Lord at all their entire life. It's in their mid-20s, and I don't even need to tell you the details. You can just picture it. Not a great lifestyle. I'll just put it that way. Making horrible decisions, lawless and moral, and it was just a nasty picture. She had an encounter with the Lord that she ended up in a church, and the guy that was preaching said, and the moment he said, if you, she came running to the front, weeping in tears, and he didn't even finish the altar call, like that was it. If you, and that was it. She was up front. They prayed for her. She is weeping before the Lord, and then she goes home, which was in another state, actually another country at the time, goes home. She walked in her front door, and she recognized how dark her apartment was. And before that, it was normal. What is that? That's when the Holy Spirit lives inside of you. This is where conviction comes in. When you let the Holy Spirit direct you, guide you, and lead you, you no longer can do the things that were okay prior. Why? Because your conscience is being changed. Your mind is being changed. Your spirit being transformed. You're being renewed. And you no longer can live in the temptation. The things that were okay 5 minutes ago now make you want to puke. Well, who is that? That's the Holy Spirit changing you, remodeling you. Say, yeah, that's not you anymore. You are a new creation. You are a new man. That's what it means to walk in the Spirit. It's to let the desires of God become prevalent in every area of life where temptations are no longer temptations. Let me say this again. Temptations in your life are not meant to be temptations for your whole life. It is actually possible that their temptation, they have a season. And the way you make it a season is when you walk in the Spirit and are led by the Spirit. Because the Spirit changes your passion, changes your desires. Okay. All right.